Good morning. Can you all hear me? Excellent, cool. Good morning and welcome everyone. My name's Frank, I'm from State of Flux, and I have the pleasure of welcoming you to the 2024 Supply Management Summit, where we'll launch the 16th SRM Research Report. We're thrilled to have you here today as we explore a theme that is very key to our success, return on relationships, where we'll recognise that our suppliers are not just vendors, but key partners for our success. Before we kick off with formal proceedings, I'd like to welcome Neil Whitman-Gritz from Telstra on stage. He's of course from our host partner, and he'll say a few words and perform the host welcome. Please, Neil, can you join me in welcoming Neil on stage?
Thanks, Frank.
We acknowledge the lands of the traditional custodians across country.
From the Noongar peoples in the west to the Kulin and Kurnai nations of the south and the clans of Nipaluna.
To the Ngunnawal peoples and the Sunrise peoples of the Gadigal and Wurundjeri of the east. To the Yagara, Turrbal and Bindal peoples of the north.
And we pay our deep respects to them, to their wisdom keepers of the past, to the knowledge holders and seekers of today, and our future custodians.
Our lands nurture us as we continue the connection and our spirituality with country.
Amazing. Womanjika and welcome everyone and welcome to Telstra. Telstra acknowledge the traditional and custodians of the lands, and for those of us in Melbourne, we acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional owners. And we pay our respects to their elders, both past, present and emerging. Well, welcome everyone and welcome to Telstra. Telstra is delighted to host the State of Flux SRM Forum once again this year. And we warmly welcome everyone to our fantastic Insight Centre. The research and insights provided annually by the State of Flux team is truly world-class. And personally, I'm very excited to hear around the results of this year's research from Alan, Frank, and the team. So without further ado, I'll hand over back to Frank. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Thanks, Neil. Excellent. So before we kick off with formal proceedings, there are just a few parties that I'd like to thank. First of all, of course, again, host Telstra, who's helped us many years, especially Nika, Neil, and your wider team as well. You're absolutely fantastic to deal with for many years, so thank you. Also, Zip, our sponsor. So we'll hear from Joe in a minute. They're sponsoring this event, and they're all about, procurement orchestration platform to help businesses procure more efficiently. So we'll hear from Joe later on today. And of course, the State of Flux organising team, Alan Day, of course, thank you. And Patrice, our COO, can you give us a wave so we know here? Thank you, Patrice. They've been absolutely great in supporting the event. Jeremias from the marketing team, thank you. And of course, Mark, who's working in the background as well. Matthew as well for supporting, and of course our wider APAC team who's been helping with the in the background as well. And also, last but not least, thank you audience for being here today. Thank you so much. I know it's a very chaotic part of the year. Thank you for taking time from your busy schedule to be here. Hope that you would get something out of today. This year's theme is around the return on relationship. It's about shifting mindset from viewing supply interactions as transactional and seeing them as strategic partners. And there are quite a few events happening around the world that's making this more and more important. So of course, there's increased market volatility, a cost of living crisis, market uncertainty. So these are all things that are making it even more important. We're also seeing more supply chain interruptions. So, of course, more frequent natural disasters. We're moving from geopolitical tensions to armed conflict in the last few years, and of course, increasing cases of cybersecurity. So these are all things that are making it even more and more important for us to see suppliers as strategic partners to share insights and leverage new ideas with, instead of just transactional organizations to work with. We're very fortunate to have a great lineup of speakers today, as you can see. So they'll help share insights and experiences of how to develop meaningful supplier relationships. So I'll introduce them one by one as the program proceeds. I encourage you to engagedly, actively ask questions, share your thoughts, and make the most of this opportunity to learn from each other and also strengthen our relationships with our networks. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker from Telstra today, Nika Waters. So Nika is an experienced global leader with extensive experience in navigating complex, transformational and operational environments. She's currently a technology services partner and commercial executive. Nika brings over 10 years of experience at Telstra, where she's played instrumental role in various strategic and executive positions. So again, please join me in welcoming Nika.
Thank you. All right, I'll try again. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Nika Waters, and I'm Enterprise Executive for Partner and Commercial Management at Telstra. You've noticed I just had to read out my title because Telstra is an ever-changing place. So I've just got a new role again. So as one said to me a few months ago, if you don't like what you're doing today, just wait 6 months and you might get another job. So, but thank you very much, State of Flux. So really appreciate the opportunity. I was here last year, so clearly I've done something right because they invited me again to speak. So, but thank you, I'm really privileged to be here. So the theme of the forum today, as we're talking, is return on relationships. So unshameless plug here. Coincidentally, we are actually hosting today, this afternoon, a responsible business forum straight after this event in this room as well. So to explore the latest insights and the best practices around the responsible business. So if you are interested, you can check in reception to see if there is a spot, which I'm sure there will be, and welcome to join us for the afternoon session as well. But in the next 15 minutes, I did want to talk to you about 4 things. So number 1 is ROI of strategy. The second one is the importance of the culture. The third one is getting the right organizational design. And 4th one, investing in strategic partnerships and relationships. All right, so let's start with ROI of strategy. As you know, T25, we've been on this journey for 3 years at Telstra. So T25 is about the growth strategy, which is centered around our customer experience, which remains core focus of this year and beyond. T25 for us, it serves as a North Star in the way that we respond to the market, the way that we've got a strategic pillars set up across the Telstra business, the way that we interact with each other, with our customers, and of course, our suppliers as well. So it sharpens our focus and what we should be doing in the coming months and the coming years. So for the enterprise business, our strategic pillars include our digital capabilities and strive to be trusted partner to solve our customer problems. Whether that's the network, digital services, people and technology, whilst keeping our networks, your networks and devices safe and secure. But we can't do this alone. Collaboration across the industry is key for our success. Our supplier relationships can be multidimensional. So in some instances, we sell through relationship, sell to, buy from relationship. It can get really complicated really quickly. And on any given day, we could have all 3 of them at the same time. So therefore, the strategies need to be communicated really clearly across our partner landscape and internally as well. We've got to maintain a really good governance across all of that. So the ROI of investing in strategic relationships is the first step to that success. So if the partnership starts with a strategy, then the relationship is underpinned by culture. So this is the second bit that I want to talk to you about. This year there is a lot to be proud of Telstra, and I'm excited about the future because we are making significant difference culturally within our organisation and obviously externally in the way that we interact with our customers and our suppliers. So culture is what sets organisation apart. A strong culture builds teams, the companies, shaping the behaviours and the way that we actually drive in collaboration. So investing in the culture pays off by laying this foundation across the business. So at Telstra, you'll see the big three on the screen. So they're the key behaviours that's supported by 3 habits that will help us seize the future opportunities in the market. These habits are essential for us to achieve those strategic goals. So now imagine the power of those 3. If we can look beyond, work as one, and then make a difference. Telstra has 5,000 suppliers that we deal with, almost on a daily basis. And we've got 23,000 employees across organisations. So think about the impact that we could actually create if we behave as one and if we actually adopt those habits that you see on the screen. So which one of those 3 is my favourite? Obviously, they're all equal in value and they're all really important. But probably for the topic today and the one that I will be looking to is look beyond. So this behaviour is about expanding our thinking and the way that we actually serve our customers and the way that we interact with our suppliers and the future needs of both, including us as well. I like this one because it sees the big picture. If you actually zoom out and you can see the broader perspective and you can strive to understand what matters the most when you're actually making decisions, you will know that those decisions you are making are the right decisions. And you can then bask in the success of that. And I like this one because it does require partnership. Okay, so we spoke about the strategy, we spoke about the culture. So, but now, we need to make sure that we actually have the right organisation shape and a design. So you would have all read the news. So as I made a bit of a joke before, wait 6 months and, your role will change. So yes, we've done quite a few restructures, but this particular one earlier this year is probably the most significant one and the one that we actually seen the difference that we're now making across the company, but also externally as well. So earlier this year, we've done an analysis of our enterprise business. So there was literally no stone unturned. What we looked at is our processes, we looked at our systems, we looked at our people experiences, our suppliers' experiences as well. So we went out externally, spoken to our suppliers, what their experiences are like dealing with us as well. Our products, our services, and of course, our financials. So that's how Enterprise Reset was born. And there was an opportunity to make the right change. And talking about the decisions and one of the values that I spoke about before, look beyond, I do recall sitting there at midnight agonising over some of the structural designs and going, how are we going to make this work? But what it's actually, when I reflect back, what I kept coming back to is, the simplicity, what is going to make the biggest difference, for our customers, the way that they interact with us and the way they see us, and obviously our suppliers as well, because together we could actually drive a lot of success. So why Enterprise Reset? So we know that we've got passion, the skills, we've got the right people, but we also recognise that we need to do things differently. So it's about making the right changes and driving those best results. So as the landscape changed outside, our organisation needed to change as well. So, and that resulted in the scope of new defined enterprise technology service groups. So what you see on the screen, there is a bit of a snapshot of how we designed ourselves, and I'll zoom in a little bit on that. So we've created 4 pillars across our technology services group. And those pillars, although they servicing different capabilities, so the way that they're designed are exactly the same across all 4. So what this means is the ROI of creating these portfolios allows our enterprise business to achieve the following: simplicity, where we can actually focus on delivering value to the customer, strengthen our connection with the partners, that ensuring that we actually show up together and we drive for the consistent customer experience and the sales and the way that we interact with our customers, but also adapt and market shifts and sharpen our focus on what we will do and what we won't do. So earlier in the year, we had to make some hard decisions of which services we'll provide, how we will service the customers, looking at our customer portfolios, do we overservice some, and not spending enough time on others? So all of that is come into the focus. So the key takeaway out of this is, with our incredible suppliers, partners, and people, and together with the strategy and the right culture, this enterprise reset and this org design helps us to live to our full potential and achieve some of the goals together. So that's all well and good. So we've spoken about the design of the organization and the investment that we actually made in that. But it's also, we need to make an investment in our strategic partnerships. And that's where my team comes in. So my team's mission, and I'm going to read that out because remember, we've rejigged everything. So we've got a new mission. So drive partner management strategy and governance, align third-party costs and revenues, build strong relationships with enterprise partners, and improve profitability, financial performance across tech services portfolios. Yeah, there is quite a bit in there, isn't there? So the goal is to enable that excellent experience to our customers and making those right decisions. So partner management, actually thank you. So partner management, there you go, that's much better, isn't it? So partner management, you've met Neil. So under Neil, within the structure, so we've got a pool of incredibly talented individuals. So which they look after the strategic framework, which is our partner management, and optimizing our supplier relationships across some organization. So it is really, really important because remember, our landscape is really complicated. So where we could be selling 2 in one day, selling through, or all 3 of them together on the same day. So that's why it's really, really important to actually have investment in this team and make sure that company or across business, they all know what this team's remit is. So to illustrate, so Telstra is a ASX top 10 listed company. But if we consider the enterprise business alone, it would actually rank in a ASX top 50. So you can see the emphasis on what we need to do as a business and why we actually needed to reshape and redesign what we're doing today. So this team is actually managing nearly $1 billion under partner spend. So, and that represents about 55% of our entire third-party spend, and that's just enterprise business. So we're not talking about the whole Telstra. So to achieve this, we need to be super, super sharp on what we're actually doing. So number 1 is strengthening our partner management. We are investing in the capabilities within Neil's group, as I said before. So we're making sure that they've got the people, they've got the right skills, the right capability, the right training, so we can actually maintain those relationships. But also, we're moving very much from the tactical way that we interact with our customers in a lot more strategic way, i.e. partnerships as well. So we can actually get the fruits of the longer term success. Driving the cost savings. So cost is obviously a big one. It's a big one for all the companies, Telstra not alone. So that's why we had to do quite a number of reshuffles and relooking at our cost base as well. So, but the way that this team will contribute to the bottom line cost is actually strategically managing those partnerships, which provides sustainable growth, but also profitability. What this really means is analyzing, are we partnering with the right suppliers? So who are the right suppliers as well? Remember, we've got 5,000 of them, so there is quite a bit. And actually trying to work out, our needs. And remember from the design before, so we're really focusing on our customer needs as well. So therefore, once we understand our customers, what is the strategy? What products are we selling? How are we servicing the customers? From there, those strategic partner relationships flow. Because then this team actually understand what we need to invest in, which partners are we willing to bet on, and actually work much closer. So setting the standards and the best practices is obviously a really important one, because once you have all these fun conversations about the future growth, what are we going to be doing together, and excitement in the room, so you've got to make sure that you actually have the best practices to be able to manage that ongoing. Commercial growth goes without saying. So it's got to be profitable relationships, and it's got to be benefiting both parties as well. For us, what this means is getting ruthless in our deal registrations, as an example, which means that we can actually maximize the partner programs that we have with our partners, and actually learning more about the partner programs as well, and understanding what else can we leverage to give us that commercial oomph. And then holistic approach to the governance. So again, remember, Telstra is a big beast. Within enterprise, it gets really complicated really quickly as well. We've got multiple stakeholders. So at my peer level, we've got multiple executives that I deal with as well. So what we've got to make sure is, when we're talking about holistic approach, is it does involve all of the enterprise. So I'm not doing this alone. I'm making sure that I'm talking to my peers as well, making sure that their needs are heard as well. And, we'll provide that governance layer. So where they all come in, so we don't just drive. Neil turns up to the meeting, we'll just talk, and everyone shake hands, have a cup of coffee if it's in the morning, maybe drink in the afternoon, and we'll go home. So we've got to make sure that we actually bring everyone to the party and we have those real conversations. So that's super important. So I know that I've talked at you for quite a bit. I'm nearly there. So let me make it really easy for you and recap. So in the theme of return on relationships, investment is required on all levels of business. So things won't happen by themselves. So, and we all play a critical role in actually fostering this relationship. So remember, it all starts with a strategy. Make sure that you know what you're doing, what are your sales teams are doing, what are your customers want. Strategy is really, really important. The how you're going to execute on the strategy that's where the culture comes in. So driving that right culture, something that people can anchor on, and actually having those slogans, mottos, whatever they are, and actually working collectively towards something. I can honestly say, I will say I'm a bit of a, funny one. When new things come out, I go, yeah, let's see how that's going to stick. So, but when those three things came out and we were going through the middle of the reset, that's something that it's actually did keep me grounded, because I kept coming back. If I was struggling to make a decision, I kept coming back, to one of those three. So organizational design, super important, because we can do the strategy, you could have the best people with the best culture, but if you don't have the design right, and we did not have the design right in Telstra Enterprise. So we knew that, because we had so much duplication happening. We had people tripping over each other. There was no clarity on the roles. It wasn't that doom and gloom, because obviously we're doing something right as well to remain relevant and successful. But, it is super critical to actually have that design right and investment in the certain functions. As, looking at the functions, we realized we overinvested in some of the functions, and the market moved on. So we've actually moved the people from those functions and put them where required. One of them is a partner management. And that's the last point. So partner management, staying there laser sharp and focusing on those strategic relationships. So the combination of all of that and my experience will actually help to drive that partner relationships to maximize the value. And here is the 4 key takeaways that I finish on as well. So I will close on partnership and trust. Super, super important. So we all talk about it, we all know this, but it does take a while to build. and it takes a lot of effort. We know this ourselves, Neil and I have been in endless conversations with some of our top 5 strategic suppliers, and we actually turned some of the relationships around, from not so good to, strategic relationships. But it took time. So it wasn't a matter of week. It's, I don't know, over a year now, Neil, probably, that we've been working on one particular one. So it does take time, but you've got to keep at it and you've got to keep doing it. Sustainability and social responsibility is obviously really important, because we're all driving a sustainable business and we all have the social responsibilities as well to the community. Compliance and risk management. Yes, I know it is boring. So, but it does serve a purpose. And, you don't have to do to the nth degree, and dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's, but you have to have a rigor in place as well. And reputational or brand value, because if you don't have that compliance and the risk management under control, so you can potentially suffer, obviously, reputational damage, and the brand value diminishes. So our goal is to inspire the partnerships that go beyond the traditional ROIs, which encompass in the non-financial benefits as well. And it's things like I've already spoken about, your long-term views, your supply chain resilience, the driving sustainable business, the innovation. So they are non-financial benefits that obviously will come out of the best relationships you can have with the partners. So I hope that was insightful. I will stop talking. We will have an opportunity a bit later for the Q&A. But for now, I hope that you found this really helpful. So thank you.
Thank you, Nika. That was great. Thank you. Thanks, Nika. That was a very insightful speech. So it's fantastic. Thank you. I've just been informed that there's actually a Telstra Special Networks Tech Day that's going on downstairs. So if you're sitting here thinking it's the Tech Networks Day, this is actually the Supply Management Summit. Well, you're welcome to stay here, but there is another event on special. We'll talk about tech as well, so you'll get something out of it. But there is a special Tech Day that's actually happening downstairs as well. So, yeah. So look, we'll move on to the next part of our agenda. But before I do that, I'd just like to let you know that, as Nick had mentioned, we're very fortunate that she's going to stay behind for the discussion panel as well. So if you could please just save your questions for that. But we also have a QR code here. So you can use your phone and you can submit questions for any Nika, for Alan, and for any of us as well. So you're more than welcome to use that. So you just scan that and you can add your questions in, and then we'll moderate it, and then we can answer them during the discussion panel. For our next part of the agenda, we're very fortunate to have Alan Day here for us. So Alan obviously founded State of Flux over 20 years ago now, and he has traveled the world providing supply management advice to global organizations. State of Flux now has presence in Australia, New Zealand, Asia, UK, continental Europe, and the USA. Alan has over 20 years of experience in procurement and supply chain practices, and he'll present this year's supply management report results to us today. So if you can join me in welcoming Alan to present.
Thanks, Frank.
Thanks, Alan.
Cheers, Hannah. Morning, everyone. Thank you. I know Frank's kind of stolen all my thank yous. But I do, I mean, I have to say a huge thank you to everyone. One, turning up on I think there's like 2 spare seats, so that's amazing. Thank you for everyone on that. But also a big thank you for those people who've done the survey. Without you guys doing the survey, we haven't got any results to produce. So huge thank you for that. What we do, if you have done the survey, we do take your results and you can get a free benchmark. So we can show you how you compare versus your peers. So if you want that, please contact us. There's lots of you. So if you don't mind, you've done the survey, reach out to us. We will try and also contact you as well, but clearly demand it because we'll happily give it to you. If you didn't do the survey and you want the benchmark, you can still do it. The results only go to yourself. So you're too late for the book, I'm afraid. at this stage, but yeah, so, and I am going to go through the results. You will get the book. We don't give you the book now because otherwise you won't listen to me. You'll all look at the book. So at the end, you will get a copy of the book. Frank's mentioned the QR codes. Please scan it. Please throw questions at us. I've got a couple of warm-up questions at the end of my talk for you, but please use this because we want to make it interactive rather than have, you know, an audience of goldfish. So please make sure that you throw questions at us and try and stump us with those questions. So this is, would you believe, the 16th year of doing this global research. Again, all the books are available online that you can download. So that takes us over the 4,000 organization mark, about 4 million data points on SRM in that. So when we do your benchmarks, you know, it's not us making up the results. There's a lot of data there. The smiley face is this year's book. So that's the cover of this year's book. And you can see that we build on it. So 2022 was around resilience. 2023 was the extended enterprise. And of course, this year is around return on relationships. Don't ask me about next year. We haven't even thought about that. But that's the themes as we go. What I would say, and I was having this discussion yesterday, actually, just because we've moved on from a topic doesn't mean that these topics aren't very applicable, especially that extended enterprise topic, you know, and Nika sort of covered that around the key part around delighting your customers. Some of the stats from last year, 50% of the customer interaction for organizations were by your suppliers. So it wasn't directly your people, it was suppliers interacting with your customers. And the other 50% that I recall from last year's results was 50% of your employees don't actually work for you, they work for your suppliers. So that's kind of a scary number as well. And then if you stand back and say, well, who's managing them, who's motivating them, who's ensuring that they're aligned to your goals and values, that's where we need to think about as a profession. So that's the extended enterprise, and then we're building on it with the return on relationships. This year's book, we have some pretty cool case studies. I'm not going to repeat them. You can read about them, but Starbucks run an amazing supplier event. They do describe how they're doing it. I was lucky enough to go and speak in Seattle at that event last year. Was it last year? Might have been this year. It's all blurring into one. Yeah, it was. I think they had 6,000 attendees to that supplier event. So there's a challenge set for all of you around supplier events. Cancer Research is, I think, I'm not sure if it's globally, but certainly the UK's largest charity group. And if you think they're not that big, their third-party spend is £600 million. So they're an interesting one. And I think, you know, the brands on the rest. I was talking to someone, they said they're right in the middle of a negotiation with Microsoft. So hopefully that might give you a little bit of insight into their thinking as well. So this year's results, you'll see that a fairly even spread around kind of the developed areas of procurement. So Europe, Australia, New Zealand, sort of Asia Pac, and North America. So what we're finding, and this is the same really, is that you've got to be reasonably mature in your procurement function before you get to SRM, which is why we really don't get much from Latin America or the Middle East, actually. Middle East is starting to embrace this, but yeah, certainly Latin America, and virtually no responses from Africa at all. So really, you've got to be relatively mature. Interestingly, the survey responses are almost exactly the same as last year in terms of numbers. So that's quite interesting. For those of you who are new to State of Flux and haven't seen any of our research before, we, over the years, we've developed what we call the 6 pillars of supplier management. And everything is organized in that 6 pillars. So when you get the book, all the chapters are arranged in those 6 pillars. But we know that you need to work on all 6. You can't just work on your value proposition and aligning value to the organization and expect the whole program to go. Or you can't just work on process and governance. You need to work on all 6 to make them work. So the reason I'm putting this up is the results that I'm going to share with you are arranged in these pillars. And when you get your benchmark, it will give you the benchmark on those 6 pillars. So it will tell you what areas you need to work on to improve your program. So please, any questions, just either ping me, or I'm actually happy if you shout out as well. So I should do a drum roll, but this is the global results from this year. And I'm going to highlight a few things on there. So hopefully you can all see those charts. This year, only 7% of organizations are in the leadership group. So the way you understand the graphs is the dark blue lines are the leaders. The light blue lines are what we call the fast followers. And the charcoal gray are the followers. To be a leader, you need to be in 4 or more of the, we call it the established group. So it's that middle line here. You need to have 4 or more of your 6 pillars in that group. So it's not an arbitrary, the top X%. They actually have to hit good practice. To be a fast follower, you need 3 of your pillars in that established group. So that's how we distinguish leaders, fast followers, and followers. I mentioned only 7% of organizations are in the leadership group. If I look at 2022, that was 9%. 2023, that was 8%. And of course, this year, 7%. So unfortunately, it's harder and harder to maintain a leadership position in supplier management. And a lot of that is the changes that we see in the economic environment. I mean, but what we are seeing a growth in is that fast follower piece. So people are doing things, people are embracing it, and that sort of thing. A couple of areas to really highlight. Unfortunately, last is people. So Nika mentioned, culture and, investing in the people. But as an industry, we've got some work to do. We really need to work on how we're investing in our people. And when we look at people, we don't just look at procurement. We look at the wider business around, are people actually invested in supplier management? So if you think about it, to make your supplier relationships work, you need your internal stakeholders to be aligned. But who's, and even if it's only 5 to 10% of their job, has anyone defined it in their job description? Is it in their role? Is there a competency for it? Does their boss look for it? Have they been trained in it? And that's not procurement, that's your stakeholders. You'll see later on that the leaders have done very well at defining the procurement or the head of supply management role, but still there's a lot of work to be done on defining it for the wider business and putting it into the wider business job description. Because I'll give you a quote, and some of you have heard this before, but making supply management work is a business change program led by procurement, not a procurement change program. So hopefully that makes sense for everyone. I'm happy to go through it. I think probably the interesting one for all of you is the APAC results. So this is your results. And I've got my laptop here in case anyone asks me some specific stats questions, but I have tried to remember a few. So we have we've had a couple of increases. Most importantly, in APAC, there has been an increase in people. Not much, but at least we are sort of investing in it. So that number has gone up by 2%. But value has declined by 6%. So what that tells me is that we aren't refreshing our business cases. We aren't making that case for change. We aren't setting ourselves up for success. The other major move was actually we have improved governance by 8%. So that's good. People are working on process and governance in that area. So there is some positive upticks around governance and people, but the value and even engagement have declined. So those two areas, setting your program up right, for this region remains a key area of improvement. So from those results, you can see that value's slipping because people haven't got their business case. And it's interesting around that business case for change, getting airtime on your executives is getting harder and harder, especially with all the kind of changes, the third-party risks, the mergers and acquisitions, everything that's happening in the market today makes getting those executive airtime much, much harder. And so we are seeing that value is slipping. And so I would encourage you to either refresh your business case or if you haven't got one, undertake one. We know that the leaders are getting strong support from their leadership, from the C-level. So they get it. The biggest challenge really is that middle management layer, which really requires you to get that business case right. And then we're still seeing that we're not doing the basics well. So there is gaps in contracts, performance management, risk management. So we still, as a profession, we need to do the basics well. Now, one of the challenges that we have, I think, and certainly we're seeing it from the research, is that executives or the business assume that we're already doing these things. And what they're interested in is, do we have a good relationship with the supplier? Are they going to support us in times of trouble or growth or innovation, that sort of thing? They're assuming that this is already sorted. Now, my recommendation is use your SRM program to also uplift the skills and competencies in those areas. As I said, about half of organizations have defined the role of the supplier manager, but not the roles in the business. So that's the piece that we have a challenge. Technology, we have seen a bit of an increase in technology, so people are spending money on technology, but it's not aligned to what we need it to do in supplier management. So what people are trying to do is take a traditional P2P system or a contract management system and try and make it into supplier management, and generally it doesn't work. So there is opportunity to improve technology there. What we are seeing though is that if you're a leader, they're getting much more benefits, especially around innovation and supplier collaboration. So yeah, so there's definitely value in doing it, and I think that's the big point there. For you locally, as I said, the value has declined. It declined about 6%. So this puts onus on getting your business case sorted, really. Making sure it's aligned to your business objectives. We use 3 techniques on getting value and engagement kind of sorted. The first one is a current state assessment. Where are you today versus where you want to get to? Pretty simple. But the other one is measuring whether you're a customer of choice for your key suppliers. And then the third one is mapping the supplier or the customer journey, the end customer journey, and looking at all the supplier inputs along that journey. Those are the three techniques we use to help create that value case or that case for change. We've seen a good increase in governance, which is great. So people are working on the process, segmentation, treatment strategies. Still more work to be done in processes, especially around segmentation. The segmentation still is a little, how do I put it, basic around people are still using spend and criticality as the key things and not broadening it out into other aspects, which I'll touch on. And as I said, hats off, you're the only region globally that people have increased. Which is great news. Make sure you ping those questions too, or otherwise shout them out if you want. So I'm going to race through these because otherwise I'm going to be in front of you way too long and everyone's going to fall asleep. So we don't want that. But these are some of the kind of insights that we've seen all the way through. The key thing is, if we look at the value, if you're good at SRM, you're going to get more benefits. Simple maths. 87% of leaders have got benefit on innovation. So that's a good one. And they have their business case in the 90s, 92% of people. Whereas if you flick and look at followers, a lot of them aren't even measuring the benefit, or they can't align the benefit to their business case. So three quarters of them can't do that. In terms of engagement, so again, leaders get buy-in from their executive. And I don't mean your head of procurement. I mean your CEO, COO, that needs to be aligned to your business to make it work, and leaders do that. But you'll see that nearly 60% of organisations with other priorities, just getting heard. Part of that, guys, is simple. Have we defined what supplier management means for your organisation? A lot of organisations still haven't done that. How are we going to get priority when the business doesn't really understand what supplier management actually is? And then nearly 90% of leaders get formal feedback. And I was a bit of a pain this morning, but I changed the slide much to his delight, just to highlight the word formal, because we see a lot of people, when we go and talk to people and go, do you measure whether you're a customer of choice? And people go, oh yeah, we talk to our suppliers and they tell us. Well, they might do, but they also probably tell you what you want to hear when they're trying to bid for you as well. So, guys, we do need to get into the habit of structural, formal feedback that doesn't just measure whether you're important to the supplier, but how do you stack up against your competitors? So please, I think there's two types of surveys you should be doing with your supplier. One is, are you a customer of choice? So the one I just described. The other one is on a one-to-one level with those super strategic suppliers, looking at a 360 feedback around what do they think of you, what do you think of them. The two are slightly different because one's one-to-one, whereas this is, are you a customer of choice for as many suppliers? So typically when we would do it, we'd choose about 100 to 200 suppliers as a subset to measure that. So in the case studies, if you read, I think Microsoft talks about the work we did with them around that customer of choice piece. So that formal feedback is super important because it shows you where you need to put your time and effort. But equally, it also helps you with your business case for change internally. Governance, yeah. So people are meeting with suppliers. That's great. Nearly 90% of leaders are meeting with their suppliers. but I'm not sure they're as structural and as rigorous as we want. But at least they're meeting with them. So that's good. And leaders have aligned their treatment strategies on their processes. So those are things that leaders do that followers are not doing. But what people aren't doing is mapping out the roles and responsibilities, or the RACI, between both organizations for those strategic suppliers. I'm not talking, for example, for Nika's 5,000 suppliers, but certainly the top 10 to 20 suppliers, we should have a fully mapped governance model from both sides, where we understand the roles and responsibilities for both sides. So only, just under a third are starting to do that. People, we've got some insights here. So I mentioned that leaders are defining the role. And a lot of times it's carried out on a part-time basis, and only roughly a third of respondents are actually training. Training's an interesting thing. So any guesses of the skill that is an important skill, but we train too much on? Anyone got any ideas? Negotiation, yeah, absolutely, you're spot on. Yeah, so negotiation is the only skill that we train more than the requirement. Whereas other skills, and the one that came out top this year was looking for non-traditional sources of value. So clearly all the behavior skills are important, but that finding non-traditional sources of value was one that came out as a key skill with a big gap. So you can train behaviors. Clearly, you have to define what behaviors you want first, but you can train them, and you can put people in situations to learn what behaviors you want from them. So for me, there's quite a bit of work to be done in this area. But as I said, at least people like the leaders are defining the roles. The trick is to then expand it into the wider business. Technology is interesting. So people have embraced contract lifecycle management, but the gap really is performance management. I think that people are finding that very hard on a technology basis. So there is a gap there, and definitely relationship management. So those are the two areas there. But you'll see that the main advantage is supporting supplier performance management. So despite there being a gap, there is an advantage of doing it. But I love this. 34% say that they're happy with the current system. It lies down the lines and statistics. What we could have said is 66% are really unhappy with the result. So yeah. So actually, 2/3 of people are saying we're not happy with the technology that we're using around supplier management. So one of the things you could do is just look at how you're running your program and how you're using technology to support it. I think there's a gap there, and certainly that's what the results are showing. And then the final pillar is collaboration, and generally this is an output of the other 5. So I've mentioned that you need to do all 6 pillars. Generally, they're done in the order that we've run through them, with collaboration being the output of that. And the key thing here is that leaders are getting innovation. I think we've touched on that. But we're also seeing that they're getting better impact from their account management as well. And this is super important when you get these complex relationships that Nika talked about. I do have a slide on it, but you get these multifaceted relationships where they're a customer, a supplier, a competitor, and a partner, and often all of those at the same time as well in some instances. So those multifaceted relationships require far more account management than in the past. And the problem here is that 90% of the followers, So most of the followers don't have account plans with their suppliers. And if you don't know what an account plan is, throw the question out there and I'll happily describe account planning with you. But we think that's kind of the holy grail of it. The topic this year was return on relationships. I've just been given the 5-minute bell, so I'm going to talk quickly on this. But you'll see that, you know, nearly, well, just over 2/3 of leaders are defining return on relationship as not just financial benefit, but other benefits like access to scarce resource, access to innovation, access to the A-team, all those customer of choice type benefits that we've talked about over the years. What we're seeing massively is this paradigm shift from transactional relationships to collaborative relationships. But to Nika's point, getting the culture to embrace those is a challenge. And I did a piece of work earlier for a client where we were looking at what their kind of strategy should be for 2030. And one of the things that we looked at was, what are the futurists saying? And they're all saying that we're moving from the information age to the reputation relationship age. So there's quite a paradigm shift there. So one of the questions would say is, are you measuring the relationship or the reputation of your suppliers, as well as the hard things? So barriers to achieve these return on relationships: data is one, resource is another, which I think we all suffer for. These complexity of these multifaceted relationships is also there. But the key thing is around these kind of business case and benefits for you. I'm going to talk very quickly. So what we're seeing is that people understand the kind of need for return on relationships, but only 8% are measuring things like supplier reputation and the relationship. I had a chat with, I'll mention the name, Fonterra on Friday, and they were talking about a relationship that they'd spent 2 months defining the requirements that they wanted the supplier to do. And then they couldn't understand why the project went wrong. And I asked, did anyone actually define what the relationship was going to look like with that particular supplier? Because it was going to be a long-term project. And they defined the kind of physical requirements and the data requirements, but no one had actually defined how the two organizations were going to work together, what happens when something goes wrong, what's the governance model. So they hadn't actually, you know, what are the behaviors? They hadn't kind of defined the relationship piece. And so what we're seeing is only 8%, virtually no one is really looking at that kind of reputation relationship piece. I talked about the 4 types of relationships. So, you know, customer, partner, competitor, and supplier. I love the fact, so Nika was looking at it from a customer perspective: sell to, sell through, sell with, compete with. Yeah, certainly. And so that's the other thing that we're seeing an emergence of, is the recognition that the customer is key to this. So we need to make sure that everything we do in supplier management actually will translate all the way through to your end customer. And then what are people doing at the moment? These are the things that people do in terms of getting success. So holding regular meetings and performance views, leadership engagement, and establishing effective comms. But to Nika's point, it's all about trust and building trust. And from previous research, we've seen that the key thing to building trust is to be sharing data and being open with goals and objectives. So it's great to hold regular meetings, but if you're not sharing data and sharing objectives, sharing goals, then they become a bit of a talking point. Now, the worst thing that you could have is when you have executives that are supposed to go to your quarterly business review with the supplier, and they turn around and say, oh, I don't need to go this time because I haven't got any problems to discuss. Well, that's not what we want them to be discussing. We want them to be talking about new innovation, new go-to-market, new challenges that they might have. We don't need them to solve problems. That's what the governance model should be there to do. So, and then just what can you and should you be measuring? So hopefully you can read that slide. But on the quantitative side, we're seeing a lot more people measuring cost savings and efficiencies. Revenue preservation and supplier performance. And then qualitative is things like, actually, risk is hard to measure, but your mitigation is using the good relationship. Measuring your strategic alignment and measuring innovation. So those are kind of the things to measure. And then the final kind of calls to action. So I talked about mapping the end customer journey and looking at the supplier's influence along that end customer journey. That formal feedback, measuring whether you're a customer of choice for your key suppliers, and then using those to create that business case for change. We find we don't sell, as an industry, we're not selling sort of our expertise, our growth internally enough. So coming up with your internal sales pitch is quite key. So that's point number 4. What is your sales pitch for supplier management? Have you got a communications plan, almost like a marketing plan for your sales pitch? We've talked about people, but investing in people, so defining the roles, not just your procurement roles, but also the wider business roles, and then training. And then, clearly doing things like framework models, stakeholder collaboration using technology, and then finally the kind of joint account planning that I talked about. So those are kind of your calls to action. There's 8 of them. We will share these slides, so you can steal with pride. Please do. So the next session here was some questions. I've got 3 prepared questions just to warm you up, and then how are we going for questions? We got lots. Good. Yeah. Oh, okay. So I don't know if we'll get through all of them, but I'll do my best. So the 3 prepared questions, I'm going to give you 60 seconds because these are going to be quick fire questions. If you get your phone out, if you haven't scanned the code, please quickly do that. I'm going to sit down. Oh, I broke my leg 8 weeks ago, so apologies if I'm limping around. Right, how are we going for the 60 seconds? 20 seconds more. 3, 2, 1, a bit more. It's going up. Hold on. Everyone voted? A few nods around the room. Okay. There we go. You mean I should have just had this live and everyone could 43. That's interesting. Well, at least there's no scores for don't know, which is good. Yeah, I mean, it's not much surprise, right? With cost savings, cost avoidance, but what's good is, the operational and improved risk management, customer satisfaction. So, it's a good, well-rounded piece. The challenge is formally measuring them. So we'll move on. As I said, these are warm-up questions. What skills need improvement in your organisation. So, yeah. Well, this is interesting. Definitely SRM, but yeah, it's not surprising. Yeah, it could be. Yeah, it's interesting. It is. I do think, you know, with COVID and people not coming into the office, we've missed just that kind of osmosis of training that people get just being around each other as well, which puts more emphasis on having to catch people up with formal training. I think there is a piece there. But yeah, interesting. Yeah, definitely SRM. Okay. And then the last question, business case. Given I've bent your ear for half an hour about getting your business case sorted, shall I show you the results while it ticks through? Right, okay. Although it's not unsurprising, really, when you think about leadership group only being 7%, 11% it's gone up, 13% of business case being developed isn't unsurprising. Any thoughts, comments on any of those quick fire questions? Thank you for doing that. I think some interesting insights. Frank will probably come and talk to you all about training and business case after this. Yeah. Right. I think you've all done that. Oops. Sorry. Questions?
Yep. So Alan, so we do have a few questions from the crowd. Again, thank you for sending them through, and please do keep them coming. The first one, actually, it's a really good segue from that last slide. This person's asking, do you have any suggestions for convincing resistant execs to consider the business case where there are competing procurement priorities, e.g. category strategy?
Yeah, good question. And interestingly, I had a lovely chat with Bob yesterday, who sits on multiple boards, about how do you convince stakeholders, and we were sort of talking about fear being one of them that doesn't really work. You know, trying to scare people into change isn't really the right approach. So what we've found works is two strategies. One, clearly showing the data around why you get benefit from doing this. I mean, and that's part of the reason why we started doing the research all the years ago, was actually to give people some facts and data that they could use for their business case. So using facts and data, I think, is super important. And that's why I'm suggesting, you know, right at the beginning, doing that current state assessment, doing the measuring whether you're a customer choice and the value mapping, because all of those things will then go to your executives to convince them why they need to invest in this. But the other one that I think is quite powerful is the whole fear of missing out. So, you know, the fact that often the grass is greener does drive people. So what are other organizations doing in this space is also a really good way of invoking change, I think. Yes, there's a bit of fear that you can invoke, but I don't think that's kind of the key strategy. For me, it's probably the fear of missing out and the appeal to their intellectual capabilities with the facts and data behind it. So hopefully that answers that question.
Yep. So the next one's about where is SRM best positioned in the business?
Yeah, you know, having done this for quite a number of years now, we've seen all models, right? Where there's a completely devolved model and it's done in the business, all the way through to, you know, I know of one UK bank that has 300 people in their supplier management function. Granted, predominantly for them, the R is more risk than relationship, but still 300 people. I think the best model is kind of that center-led model, where you have a core kind of center of excellence, and then a lot of the relationship management is done in the business. Because let's face it, the business interact with the supplier. So that center-led would own the process, the governance, the policies, the procedures, the training, the technology, but often not the relationship. The caveat to that is that when you get those multi-layered relationships, those big complex relationships, the ones that span multi-divisions or geographies, often it's best then to have those centrally managed with a kind of key account manager equivalent. So maybe call it a supplier account manager, that type of thing. So for me, it's kind of that center-led with the top of the pyramid managed centrally, but the rest devolved into the business. So hopefully that. But I'm happy to talk and feel free to nab me either in the break or afterwards to go even further onto that if people like to.
So this next one's actually related to the financial sector specifically, but given the regulatory compliance that's coming on board across the globe, it's probably relevant to other industries as well. But this one's directly related to the CPS 230 and APRA. It's asking, is the SRM team becoming a PMO team, reporting to board and risk forums in banking, life insurance, where risk and compliance are dominant?
Yeah, it's interesting. I won't talk specifically 230, although I'm familiar with the regs. What I'm going to do is talk a bit more holistically, and what we're seeing with certainly financial services regulations is that people are starting to recognize that poor supplier performance is a risk, and that also the mitigating answer. So if something goes wrong, actually leveraging the relationship is the right thing. So we have the strange situation where one of our State of Flux alumni is now the Chief Procurement Officer for the Financial Conduct Authority. So we're getting some quite good insights from what they're doing. And certainly they are really pushing to make it more holistic. And I'm seeing that being replicated in other regulations. So it's not just financial services. So for example, in the UK, there is some regulations now at the board level where you have to formally survey your suppliers. So, well, not survey, sorry, get feedback from your suppliers. But in my mind, formal and feedback translates to survey. But yeah, so that is becoming regulation. We're certainly seeing some of the German legislation putting requirements through, and then you're also seeing modern slavery regulation driving requirements through. I think there was a question earlier, submitted earlier around ESG as well, and certainly those regulations are all driving more holistic management of suppliers. So the benefit for those of you in the room is you can use that as part of your business case for change, is the regulation. I think the challenge is that you don't want to turn into an admin function just complying to the regulations. Because if you're an admin function, then the business won't let you talk strategically to the suppliers. So it's a challenging road to walk.
So this next one relates to supplier segmentation. So you've mentioned that there are other factors beyond spend and criticality. So can you elaborate on what other factors that can turn them into quantifiable or rateable sources?
Yeah, great question. And we do have a white paper on segmentation that you can download from the website. But the best programs I've seen have about 15 different criteria that they use. So the most common is spend and criticality, but then clearly risk is one. Customer impact would be another. Often if they touch customer data, that could be another one. But the ones that I like are not the inward-looking ones. So does the supplier see you as a strategic customer? Or are they willing to work with you in a collaborative manner? Because, you know, I know if you're not, you know, a lot of people will have someone like Microsoft or IBM in their strategic suppliers, but certainly for Microsoft, if you're not in the top 86 customers globally, you're not a strategic customer. So no offense, but there's probably maybe one or two banks in the room, but the rest of you are not strategic customers for them. So if you're then trying to do collaboration and joint go-to-markets, you're not going to get much of an audience for those sort of people. So for me, having both lenses, both your lens and their lens, is quite important. So yeah, about 15 different criteria. Access to innovation, sustainability might be another one. So yeah, not all used at once. So don't take your tens of thousands of suppliers. We recommend doing it in a three-staged approach. So small criteria, so maybe spend and criticality for all your suppliers. Then widen the criteria, shorten the list, and take that around your category managers. And then widen your criteria to the 15, shorten the list again, and take it around the business stakeholders and get their input. So a three-phased approach on segmentation. And the other thing people do wrong is they don't redo it. So make sure you redo it on a regular basis. So how are we going for time and questions?
Yeah, we probably have time for one more. And this one relates directly to the research. So it's asking what's driving the increase of people pillar for APAC compared to other regions?
I think there has been an investment. People are investing in training in APAC, probably more than we've seen in the other regions. Yeah, I think, and whether that's a factor of hard lockdowns and now people are investing in people, or just a realization that we do need to upskill people. But for me, the big mover of the needle has been that training piece. I still think we need to get more formal around managing or defining the roles and responsibilities within the relationship and that governance model. But you know, big tick for people investing in training, and I expect they'll, you know, from the results we've seen, there's more investment required. And the other bit to think about is what training are you providing the business? So yeah, so there's good news, good green shoots, but still plenty to do. Hopefully that covers it. I'll be on the panel, and I'm also wandering around. Grab me at the break, whoops, I think I've gone backwards, not forwards. But I think we're time for a coffee now. So please
join me in thanking Alan. So as Layla mentioned, we do have a 30-minute break. So there's food and coffee outside as well. So please help yourselves. After 30 minutes, the music will start playing, and then you can dance your way back to our.
It's not a just muck around. Please think of other questions for us while you're grabbing your coffee, please. Thanks.
Welcome back, everyone. Hope you've had a good feed and some coffee as well to refresh. So for our next segment, we're very lucky to have Joe from Zip, who talk us through Zip a little bit. So Joe is an expert in procurement and finance technology. He's had over 20 years experience helping organizations navigate digital transformation and optimize their procurement operations. At Zip, Joe leads initiatives that transform procurement processes through the integration of advanced technology. If you can join me in welcoming Joe on stage, that'll be great. Thank you. Thanks, James.
Let me just switch that on, make sure it's all working. Perfect. Good to see everyone coming in today. I think it's we're talking about relationships and the importance of relationships. And I think probably nothing proves more the importance of relationships when people value coming in and spending time together and talking to each other and learning from each other. So it's great to see the room so full today. I'm from Zip. Some of you might be thinking, what is Zip? We're not the payments Zip, that's not us. Zip is the world's leading intake and process orchestration platform. And I say leading, we have recently been announced that by the IDC for the marketscape of intake and process orchestration, which is a category that we have pioneered and come up with. So we're 4.5 years old, based in San Francisco. I want to touch on today a little bit about how process orchestration is really helping drive better collaboration between internal stakeholders and therefore suppliers as well, and how we are helping to use that to unlock value. So procurement are doing a lot more these days, and we've heard a lot about that earlier this morning in some of the talk tracks with Nika and equally with Alan this morning. So I guess if we looked at back in my time when I was in procurement as a procurement practitioner, you know, the procurement scorecard was pretty simple, right? It was cost savings. When we kind of like started running out of cost savings, it was, what do we do now? Cost avoidance. Then it was, let's put some DIFOT in there and talk about maybe how much spend we can get across and how many contracts we've got in place. I think now with all the different priorities that procurement are taking ownership of in terms of business priorities, things like sustainability, modern slavery, ESG, supplier diversity, the voice of the internal customer, voice of the supplier. Procurement's ownership and what we're doing and what we're getting involved in is far broader and equally far more complex. There's a lot more things that we're having to manage, and that complexity continues to accelerate. Organizations are really focused on doing what's core to their business, and organizations are much more reliant on suppliers to help drive the growth of the business. I mean, just in the case of Telstra, we heard earlier, like 5,000 suppliers, 23,000 end users, employees in the organization. That's just Telstra. Like, you know, if we get into the big four banks and other organizations, it's massive. And so procurement are there trying to manage more and more of these priorities. And there's a higher expectation from stakeholders, both from external stakeholders being suppliers and equally internal stakeholders. There's an expectation that people just want things to be easier. Like in our consumer lives, we expect things to be easy. Like we're so time poor, we just want things to work. I just want to book the Uber, just want to book my holiday through Airbnb. And there is that expectation from both suppliers and internal stakeholders that it should just be easy to work with procurement. So we need a different approach to tackle that because it isn't easy to deal with procurement. So it's tricky, it's complicated. There's a lot more things that we're managing as a procurement function, but the level of investment in headcount and resource and capacity within procurement functions, most of which are hybrid decentralized. So creating reach back into the business and giving ownership to the business to manage procurement under guidelines set by a central procurement function. Teams aren't getting bigger. You know, we're not seeing, I grew up in the heyday, I guess, of working in procurement at General Motors Holden when there was a floor of procurement of 170 people. That doesn't exist anymore, yeah? Procurement functions aren't growing at the scale at which businesses are growing, at which businesses and their supply bases are growing. So functions are having to do a lot more with less. And there's a lot of process inefficiency, right? There's a big productivity gap there. How does procurement get the reach into the organization and still provide those guide rails when you just can't grow your headcount? You can't extend and create copies of your category managers or your vendor relationship managers or your procurement managers and sit them side by side across 23,000 end users in the business. That's not scalable. That's just not going to work. Yes, there's been a level of investment within technology. I think even what we saw earlier with what Alan had put up on the screen as well was technology is getting some investment there, but I would say after or during COVID, where we had to invest in technology because we're all working remotely and we still needed to get our jobs done. So, okay, like we need tech to help us here. We're seeing a little bit of a drop off on the investment in technology as well. And that's creating problems. I spoke about the complexity of procurement. Yeah, procurement is extremely process driven as a discipline. Yeah. We have lots of processes all the way from source to contract and procure to pay. But it's the employees, it's procurement's customers within the business that are bearing the brunt of that process and the complexity of that process. Because it looks different. When we talk about a buying channel or an end-to-end process against each of the categories that procurement are responsible for buying, whether it's IT, marketing, sales, contingent labor, each of those processes from an end-to-end value chain perspective look really different and have very different inherent risks associated with those categories to make sure that they're managed effectively, to make sure we're using the right suppliers that are pre-qualified by procurement. And so when you put yourself in the persona or the hat of someone as an end user in the business, that's really opaque. Like, it's really difficult to understand what does that process look like? And how do I navigate that process? And how do I get to the right outcome? But how do I do it like quickly and actually make it quite easy? How do I get to the point where I can actually start to leverage and use preferred suppliers that procurement has set up within the organization? How do I know that when I have a new need for goods and services that I'm actually selecting the right suppliers that are aligned to the business values and the business strategy? How am I making those informed decisions? And then equally, how are procurement kind of getting the visibility of that upfront from end users in the business so that they have the time to be able to proactively manage that, rather than getting to the point of a retrospective purchase order data analysis that says, oh my God, like I did not know we're using all these different suppliers. How has that actually happened? How have we not had the opportunity to see this? How did this slip through? How have we got such a low percentage of spend with our preferred suppliers? How is this actually happening? So again, from an end user perspective, we want clarity, we want simplicity. We want to take the complexity out of the procurement process and make it very simple. And really dispel the maze, the myth, the kind of black box of what is procurement, what does it look like, and how do we actually navigate that as an end user? To find the pathways to driving better collaboration between the business and procurement, and then equally driving much better collaboration with suppliers. Where are we losing time through process inefficiency? I guess the lack of collaboration drives us to using the channels that we kind of are using today to be able to just get the job done, get the process from point A to point B. So that is Teams, SMS messages, WhatsApp groups, countless number of Teams meetings. We're using all these different channels of communication and spending an inordinate amount of time just trying to collaborate and move things forward and get the right process done and drag people to the right process. But we're not spending a lot of time actually adding value, innovating, driving new ideas, thinking about ways to unlock additional value, how to do things differently, actually spending the time collaborating with our stakeholders to unlock new ideas. So we spend like quite a bit of time on just communicating about the work because we don't have the visibility of what's going on and where it's happening, rather than actually doing the deep work. And therefore, we really want to look to improve the collaboration both with internal stakeholders and therefore the collaboration with suppliers. We want to dismantle these barriers that we have in place today that stops us from working effectively, that stops us from working together with our internal business partners on being on the same page about what's going on, where we are in the process and what needs to take place to get to the outcome. And not just getting on the same page with our internal stakeholders, but equally with suppliers. Suppliers want that early visibility, right? They want to know the demand that's there within the business and want to understand what that partnership's going to be like working with you as a customer. Being reactive to the supplier puts them under pressure as well. So there's this concept now in the category of both intake and process orchestration that we've pioneered, but in the recent CPO survey results that were published from Deloitte, I'm not sure if you guys have seen any of that, but definitely worth a really good read. It always is a great read, the CPO survey. We look at the top priorities and strategies for leading procurement functions globally, and we can see that of all the top value initiatives that are listed here, these are all to do with better supplier management. Right? These are all about how do we increase the level of supplier collaboration? How do we drive better innovation and unlocking innovation with our suppliers? How do we better manage demand? How do we get ahead of what the business is doing and proactively influence that and proactively manage that? How do we renegotiate with our suppliers in a really good way? How do we restructure the supply base? What does that look like in a post-pandemic world? What does that need to look like to give us the resilience in our supply chain that we require? So the procurement paradigm is shifting, and the focus of procurement now is very much around being those trusted business partners to the organization to help align that with the business priorities that matter to your organization. It's about leveraging the power of AI to drive process efficiency, to take away from the time that we're spending as procurement, to my slide earlier, around just process and project managing the process. Take time away from that to unlock time and give time back to strategic procurement to focus on the things that really matter, which is driving value back to the aligned to the business priorities. And AI plays a massive role around that, helping with that. And it's then about identifying up front those suppliers that are going to truly give you the opportunity within your businesses to align with your key business values and key business objectives, right? How do you build those stronger relationships with those suppliers? So what is orchestration? It's not an orchestra, I'll tell you that much. Orchestration is all about weaving together a coordination of workflows, information, people and stakeholders, and then cross-functional systems. It's about cascading out the process that an end user needs to follow to be compliant, to make sure the right governance and processes are put in, so governance and audit is in place, to make sure that the right information is there at the right time for the end user, to drive automation across workflows, to get everybody looking and working on the same page, to give everyone within the business one user experience when they're working with procurement, to get much better insights into what is happening at what stage of the process and how long is it actually taking, and driving much better collaboration across the business because you're all working on one platform, one landscape, one user experience. You're demystifying what the process is because that process has already been automated for you to simply follow as an end user. And furthermore, you have the ability to then connect into all the different or relevant third-party systems that may already exist within your landscape today to execute some of those steps of the process. So as an example, if as part of that process, you would need to conduct a third-party risk assessment, you would be able to integrate into your third-party risk assessment tool and conduct that. You almost don't need to know what that tool is. That's almost agnostic and irrelevant. What's important is that the user conducts that step in the process, they understand who's responsible for approving it, and they can see the status of it and that the fact that it's actually done. We want to bring a new supplier on board. We want to make sure that these steps are taken, that these steps are controlled, that we're partnering with the right suppliers that are aligned to our values as an organization, but we don't want to compromise the governance and the compliance, and we don't want to compromise the user experience around getting there. So often that is the challenge that we have as procurement is you want us to do all these things and you want us to pick these suppliers, and yes, we want to make sure that we're spending within the community and using diversity of suppliers, but that just slows us down. As an end user, that represents 3% of my job. I just need to go and get this done, but I don't want to compromise that. So this is about making that process, remove the opaqueness, make it transparent, show the business what's going on, help them self-serve to get to that outcome, but not at the compromise of governance and compliance. Inject speed and agility into the process, inject collaboration and visibility into the process, because when you can see things up front, you can take action. And that's very much around what orchestration is. It's a combination of two elements. It is around centralization of process and creating visibility and giving a single kind of digital door to end users in the business to commence their journey, to commence their process, to kick off their requirement that they have with procurement. Whatever that might be. I have a need that means I want to use an existing supplier. Great, let's grab that and make sure that we're using the right suppliers that we have today. I have a net new need. Let's make sure we're going through the right process to bring on the right suppliers. Or hey, like all of a sudden we're seeing demand for a certain pocket in the business, that equips procurement with the ability to have a conversation with the supplier that says, we're actually doing a lot more with you than we knew we were actually doing. So that changes the whole conversation. That changes the whole strategic importance of the relationship that we thought we had with a certain supplier, because all of a sudden we can see a lot more about what's happening together with them. So both centralization and visibility are really key pillars of both intake and process orchestration, and its ability to be able to drive that internal collaboration across the business in a very, very simple way. What we're seeing a lot of in terms of the impact that this is having, so thinking back to how orchestration is driving both process efficiency, automation, that's unlocking time and giving time, really valuable time back to the central strategic procurement function to rethink the way that they work. It changes the way that the operating model for procurement can look like. It starts to Alan's point earlier, we're talking about investment in training and uplift of capability on things like SRM. If I finally have time to do that because I'm not spending a bulk of my day with end users, talking them through the right way to raise a purchase requisition in my P2P system, and I can guide them to do that on their own, I can actually then now focus and repurpose my time to say, how do we stand up SRM within our function? And what does that look like? What is our framework? What is our process? What does the capability look like? And what technology tools do we need to bring that to life? What does category management look like? We've never had the chance to do category management because we don't have the time and capacity, but if I don't have to go and invest in new resources and I can leverage those resources and repurpose time that I've given back to them around that, let's bring category management to life within our functions. So we're seeing the new wave of procurement and procurement operating models benefiting in a positive way from process orchestration and intake and automation, because it just creates time and value back to what procurement should be doing. I had a conversation the other day at another event where I was speaking to, and I won't name them, but an organisation was a reasonably sized team, and I just asked them, what's the structure of your team? What does everybody do? Oh no, they said to me, no, we're good. We wouldn't need anything like orchestration or anything like that. We're fine. I said, well, tell me a little bit why. Like, what does the business do? What does your team do every day? Oh, like Jane knows to call John every time, like he has to raise a purchase order. Jeremy works with Jimmy down in the lab because every time he needs the good receipt, he just can't do it. So he's got to call him to get that help, to get that done. It's all tactical, right? There is no strategic work that's going on within that function. So it's about lifting away from that, providing guide rails and simplicity for an end user to self-serve on those things and make that very simple and easy, and then allow procurement to focus on the things that we need to be focusing on, which is unlocking value through the relationships with suppliers. And we saw the results from the CPO survey of Deloitte, where those traditional sources of value have been exhausted. We've got to look into the supply base and build compelling relationships with suppliers to drive a new conversation with them to start really tapping into the value that sits within that supply base, because suppliers are key in driving the growth and direction of the business. So I guess as I getting reasonably close to wrapping up, and I'm getting the nod, but I guess my key message is around orchestration absolutely is an enabler to driving better supplier relationships, because through process automation and product efficiency and efficiency, we can really unlock time, give that time back to procurement to focus on things like SRM. But equally, we can create much better visibility of the kinds of engagements that the business is having with our supply base. And then how do we harness the power of that? How do we take that with purpose and do something really meaningful with it? Do we have time for questions, or should I? We don't, so I've exhausted all the time. I'm not surprised. I like to talk. But thank you. I hope that was insightful. I'm around, obviously, until the end of the session today. So if you have any questions around intake and process orchestration, please just come and tap me on the shoulder. I'd love to have a chat. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. Some really good insights around how orchestration can help with better collaboration. So we've come to a very exciting part of our event today. So we have a discussion panel. You'll realise that we have a new Alan that's going to be on our panel today. So just a quick intro. Alan Wilkinson works for Metro Trains Melbourne. So if you're running late today because of the train, feel free to Alan is the head of supplier commercial management at Metro Trains. He has over 20 years experience across government, banking, and transport sectors. He was previously head of procurement and Cleanaway, and in his current role, he's successfully developed and embedded the contract management function at Metro, focusing on delivering additional value and fostering stronger supplier relationship across the organisation. If you can welcome me in inviting all panel members to come up on stage, we can start the panel discussion. Yeah, please, yeah. Absolutely. Excellent. So, Nika, you might have to excuse me. We've got two Alans on the discussion panel, so I might have to get confusing. So I might have to direct all the questions at you. So, look, just to kick us off, this is a question that's come up a fair bit through the online submissions. So it's around, organisations and short-term gains and long-term returns. So, how can organisations effectively balance short-term gains and long-term returns of building a strong relationship? Nika, maybe you can help us first on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So I spoke a little bit about it before, but when you think about one of the really super critical things is objectives, and and the goals. So when you're actually setting out the goals and objectives of the supplier, so there is a short-term ones that you obviously focus on, and it could be the really tactical ones. How's the performance going? How's the delivery of certain milestones going? How the price book going? Things like that. But then there is a much longer term goal setting as well. Where is this relationship going, from a strategy perspective, talking about, what are we going to be doing together? How you maximize the commercial benefits, out of that. That's just one aspect of it. But then, we spoke a lot about the relationship. Again, relationship is different. It could be very tactical. I need something, I'll pick up the phone call. But then there is a building out the relationship. And the way it happens naturally is, the more time you actually spend together, and it's via your meetings. Golf is another one I've heard. But via your meetings, your general speaking QBRs and stuff like that, that's how you continue to build out those relationship. I'll probably pause there, mindful, let some time, but there is a few other aspects to that as well.
Perfect, thank you. Thanks, Nika. Alan W, maybe something at Metro Trains?
Yeah, I think for me, relationship management, it's just one element of the contract management lifecycle, right? So, you've got your contract admin, you've got your performance management, you've got your risk management. To Nika's point, you've really got to get those basics right first with your suppliers before you really can get into that relationship management value creation. So, you can't just be sitting down with a supplier day one. We're going to start relationship management. Generally, there's some low-hanging fruit that you need to work through first with your suppliers, and then as you progress through that, then you're opening up dialogue around relationship management and how we can extract further value from those supplier relationships. So it's not, we've been running the program now 18 months, and I think we're only at a point now where we're starting to have those really strategic conversations with some of our suppliers. So it's really important get that low-hanging fruit out of the way first, and then you can open up those more strategic conversations.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Alan. Alan, your golf game any good?
Golf game? No, I'm not so good on that.
I'm still practicing mine.
Yeah. It's a constant practice. I think one of the mistakes I see is I often get people saying, I get this SRM thing, but I just need to do some pilots first to show some value. Well, the question I would say is, what the hell are you piloting? Because if you haven't defined what the program is, and you haven't defined what the processes and treatment strategies are, very hard to pilot to prove something when you haven't done the rest of the program. So that chase for short-term gain, I think, comes better when you have defined the program and you're sitting down in the relationship. And we use the kind of 360 review, joint account planning to create that kind of shared goals, shared objectives. And within that, there's absolutely no reason why you can't have short-term objectives. Suppliers get it. They're living through the same challenges we have in terms of, tight economy, cost out, that sort of thing. So they will completely understand. And I think what I've found is, providing you're open with your challenges and that, they'll buy, they'll buy into it, they'll support you. What they don't like is the kind of 20% off letter or the thump the table, If you can be far more collaborative with them, then they'll buy into it. Because let's face it, most of their cost is driven by stuff you do. You will make their life difficult for them. They can take cost out if your organization can be more efficient generally. So, yeah, so please don't confuse program speed with supplier speed. I think the two are different, and I would really counsel you not to go straight to pilots until you've actually defined what you're piloting. So, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Alan. The next question again for all the panel members is, we've seen from our research as well, 70% of respondents define return on relationships as generating value beyond financial transactions. So just wanted to ask, from what you guys have seen, how are organizations capturing value generated through supplier relationships beyond traditional KPIs like cost savings or delivery of performance? Nika, I think you've mentioned a few things on your slide, but would you care to elaborate for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I spoke a little bit about it, but there is a lot more to it than a financial benefit. And Alan, you just touched on the relationship side of things as well. So, when you actually get into a really good space of open communication and the relationship with the suppliers, the sky's the limit, to be honest. And we've got one really good example, this particular supplier that I said we've been together for a very long time, and our relationship's been, really good and really rocky, and now coming good again. But it took, at least 12 months of investment. And now what we actually see, now we're sort of on the other side, and it's just sort of the beginning of the other side. Some of the benefits that we're actually seeing is, we're talking about things like sustainability. Is one of the things. How do you measure that? Environment things as well. Talking about the brand value and the reputation as well. We're now having discussions, wouldn't it be good if we ran a charity together? And what that comes with, generates the sales opportunities, generates the brand awareness, things like that. So, once you get on this journey, so when you actually start thinking about those benefits, so there is far greater benefits in those sort of relationships outside the commercial ones. But however, the commercial hat on me is, every time I go, oh, we should do the footy event or something, I'm like, what's return on investment? So yes, of course you do think about it in the back of your head, because it has to be direct linkage. Otherwise, why are you in it? But yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you, Nika. Alan W., something from your point of view?
Yeah, I think in terms of capturing non-financial benefits, as we try to align procurement KPIs as much as possible to the business KPIs. I think no point coming up with what you think is a value creation target if it's not actually aligned to your business, right? So I think that's the first step, is as much as possible, aligning your procurement KPIs to the business. And I think a practical example for us at Metro, our Chief Operating Officer has a really important strategy around customer experience at the moment. So, and we've touched on it a couple of times today, a lot of our suppliers have a direct impact on the customer experience, the cleanliness of stations and trains, the bus replacement service that I'm sure some of you have caught over the last few years. Understanding how our suppliers directly impact that customer experience, we're now sitting down with them to say, well, how can you help us improve on those metrics? Because they are measured. So we can clearly articulate, from a customer experience perspective, if we're getting feedback around the cleanliness, what can we do with our cleaning provider to actually improve on that and report against that, those types of benefits, rather than just the cost savings and the cost avoidance that we traditionally do. So.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you, Alan.
My turn? Is it? Yeah,
thanks.
okay. I'm going to kind of echo the guys, but we sort of break them into hard benefits. And over the years we've seen, and it's interesting, we haven't had a question yet. We've called today the return on relationships, and no one's asked us what the numbers are in terms of how much return you get on. So typically, and look, this has been consistent over the 20 years, that between 3 and 6% additional benefit over and above your contract is the hard numbers that we're seeing from the relationship. So, and that doesn't count we've also seen over the years that 50%, between 30 and 50%, sorry, of the deals that you do, I'm sorry to say, don't translate to the bottom line. So between a third and a half of what you guys are doing or your teams are doing in procurement don't actually translate to savings because someone's not managing. So those are kind of the hard numbers, and you do need to measure them. And probably we need to be better at measuring them, but generally most people are okay at it. I think the other hard metrics are supplier performance, which we've talked on. The bit that I think people are challenged with is kind of the softer, I call them the customer of choice type benefits. So how do you measure innovation from your suppliers, or how do you measure, the fact that because you had a good relationship, you got the scarce material, or you got to the front of the queue faster during a time of challenge, or whatever, or you got something resolved immediately because you were able to pick up the phone. Those are much harder to measure. What we've found is that the best thing to do is actually set them as KPIs and do it. On top of that, then you also want to then measure your relationship. So I've talked about we use a 360 review, and that's to measure perception of the relationship. So trust and control metrics. What do you think of the relationship? What do they think of the relationship? Challenge is that we can't do that for everyone because it's just too much work. But I would suggest if you can pick your top 10 or 20 and put those in place where you're measuring perception of the relationship, then I think that's a good start. And it's a really good input if you do get into joint account planning, or I should say, when you get into joint account planning, you can use that 360 feedback. So that's how I would break it down into that kind of hard and soft measures.
Excellent. Thank you, Alan. Next, we've got a few questions specific to each of you members. Alan W., we'll start with you. So we saw from this year's research that supplier meetings and leadership engagement, they're probably the key things to driving return on relationships. Could you share any recent initiatives you guys have done at Metro, and have you noticed any early benefits from these initiatives?
Yeah, sure. So so we've just recently rolled out our contract management framework, and one of the key aspects of that is establishing contract management plans or supplier management plans with our strategic suppliers. And a critical element of that plan is actually kind of what Alan touched on a little bit, is the cadence and the governance and the roles and responsibilities that you're going to put around that supplier relationship. So your contract management plan or your supplier management plan should really quite clearly articulate what type of meetings you're going to have, who's going to be involved, what are the roles and responsibilities of individuals in those meetings, and make sure that's covered both from a supplier and internal stakeholder perspective, and everyone's signed up to that. So that'll be the first thing to do, is to actually get that cadence and that governance established. And then the second bit that's been really useful for us is the old supplier scorecard. So we've actually invested a fair bit of time in coming up with a scorecard that is measuring suppliers against risk, safety, commercial, customer service, community, continuous improvement. And that scorecard has been really powerful in having the right types of conversations in these meetings. So there's good structure around those conversations around those 6 pillars. Where we're up to from a customer service perspective, what are the risks that we're facing into. So having that structure in place, and then also in the room, as per the contract management plan, having your GMs and your internal stakeholders there that can actually make decisions is really important. No point going in there on your own and trying to influence the outcome. And what's been interesting in having these meetings with the supplier scorecard is a lot of the issues actually aren't with the supplier. We're finding, by having that structure in place, a lot of the issues that are preventing the supplier from actually, doing a great job are actual internal issues. So, we've had a contract manager recently join, and they sat in one of these, performance meetings, and they were surprised at how much of the conversation was actually on, Metro improving things internally to enable the supplier. So it's been really powerful from that perspective, because previously, you'd have corridor conversations and it's the supplier's fault, but actually having that cadence, the right people in the room, and the scorecard in place to drive the right type of conversation, we're seeing a real improvement in a lot of these supplier performance and relationships. So it's been really good.
Excellent. Yep. Thank you. Thanks, Alan. Nika, next one's for you. So from the research, we've seen that organisations, there's been decline in them linking their organisation, the strategic drivers, to supply management. And you've explained in your presentation how complex Telstra is. How do you balance, from your role, the various partnership goals across the different business units while still driving it from an enterprise-wide perspective for that common goal?
Really good question, and very topical. So I've just finished, or in the final phases of finishing a piece of work, but that is probably the hardest and the trickiest one of all, because we've got quite a number of business units. So I belong in enterprise, then we've got product and technology business. We've got a consumer business. So, and quite often, we spoke about it earlier, you've got overarching suppliers that support all of those business units at the same time. So a little bit of backstory for you, but what we found in the past, it's quite often, or actually consistently, each business unit will have the same conversations, their own conversations with that particular supplier. So, but you're not kind of together, driving the Telstra value. So then the supplier, will get the dirt, because they've got to deal with multiple people, or there is, people just not talking to each other internally. So it can get really, really tricky. And one of the things that I've been doing a lot in the last 12 months is actually setting up common goals. So we've got goals that coming from the top down. So we're actually quite good at that now. So we've had that practicing for the last probably 3 years, where we get the OKRs, really topical, and then everyone's got to contribute, and we're really, really disciplined in our game plans, we call them, and how we're actually going to be contributing to those common goals. So that's a bit that you anchor on when you're representing, for example, Telstra Enterprise Business. So I'll anchor on a common goal, and then you start having internal conversations. So what I've learned in the process is, if you can't align, you start aligning your internal stakeholders first. Because if you can't align the internal stakeholders, going out to the suppliers and actually trying to have a conversation with them gets you nowhere. Because it's either they're super smart and they'll play you off against each other. So, or they'll get the dirt, as I said, because, they're getting mixed messages, and you just find, the progress is really stale. So what we did do before, we had this major negotiation coming up. So before we even, start talking to the supplier, we spent a good chunk, probably 2 to 3 months. So it took to actually align all of our internal stakeholders, by setting the objectives. We conducted the interviews one-on-one, some of the practical things. Some people, if you put them, group executives in a meeting room, everyone talks over the top of each other and gets really difficult. So we did one-on-one interviews. Yes, it's like, mine. I'm the most important one. So we've done that. So we played it back then in the group meeting, and then aligned everyone, the stakeholders. And then, we got all of our executives on that same call with that supplier as a kickoff. So, I honestly cannot say how important this is. And now look back, on this major negotiation that we have done, that's probably one of the best things that we've done. And that's the thing that we haven't actually done in the past before, where we just faced the supplier without any of the internal alignment. So, and we did finish on a very successful note, and our relationship, that particular supplier, is now, from the bad to, I won't say really good, but definitely, into a good space. So yeah, just pure hygiene is the key.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Nika. I think there's some parallel with what Alan W. mentioned as well. Working through that internal alignment is very, very important as well. Yeah. Alan D, next one's for you. So you mentioned that 6% benefits, but most organisations probably only get modest gains from SRM. What can organisations here do to position themselves to better achieve or better get those 6% gains?
Yeah, I think we've sort of touched on it, but I'm back on my customer of choice bandwagon around being a customer of choice for your key suppliers. In the first place is you've got to measure it, because you can't improve it unless you've measured it. But what we have done recently is link the customer choice when we run customer choice, we look at 6 kind of key business areas. But what we've also then done is map those business areas back to behaviors that you want, so that you can see that if you score poorly in one area, these are the behaviors that you as an organization need to improve. So it's quite cool. And so for me, getting the kind of alignment internally, but that kind of single focus around, we need to be a customer of choice for these key suppliers. Because I think in the kind of modern world, suppliers have a choice. And let's face it, in this part of the world, we are, it's not like we've got hundreds of suppliers, and if we don't, if we're annoyed with one, we can go and change to 3 others. Frankly, we probably only have 1 or 2 others that we could change, and they'll know exactly what's gone wrong with the current one. So, it forces us to be far more kind of collaborative and far more focused on being a customer of choice. So that for me is the key piece. I'd start with measuring it. I'd start with then defining the behaviors, and then training and educating people on that. So that's how I approach it.
Perfect. And then Alan W, we've seen from the from this activity we ran just then, supplier relation management is probably the skill that was lacking the most from what audience have told us. And we've also found from the research that only 1/3 of respondents have provided supply management training for the team. We know that you've recently managed to run similar training. I think we'll be keen to know what strategies your team took to secure investment for capability investment.
To secure investment.
Yeah.
Yeah, we leveraged the services of the internal audit team. So I think to Alan's point earlier, I think there's often an assumption at the exec level that these things are getting done, and we've got the contract management framework in place. Tick the box. So yeah, having the internal audit team actually come in and sort of probe that contract management framework highlighted a couple of opportunities, and one of those was capability uplift, not only within our central SRM team, but our contract managers within the business as well. So I could have gone up to exec and asked directly, but I think not all organisations probably have a internal audit team, but execs sometimes listen to those functions. So yeah, we leveraged the findings from the internal audit to get some investment. But for those that don't want to go down that path, we've also seen just, I guess, not sort of case studies, but getting some runs on the board and presenting those to exec. So look what we've done in these pockets. If we've got some great people in the team, but if we're able to invest more in this function, we could deliver more, right? So I've seen that work as well for organisations as another way to get some runs on the board, demonstrate the value, and then you've got a good chance of getting that investment from the execs.
Excellent. You want to name drop the great trainers you've got to run your supply management training?
Yeah. That's why I'm sitting up here. No,
that's all right.
Yeah, no.
Excellent. Thanks, Alan. That's great. We've probably got some time for questions on the floor. We do have a couple of mics.
We have roving mics
as well. Just a reminder that you are in person here. There's no need to unmute yourselves when you speak. So feel free to just speak when you get up and speak. But we do please ask you to let us know your name and which organisations you're coming from as well. So that'll be great. Anyone have any questions? You guys can. We've got some mics floating around. We too shy. Yeah, please. Matt. Thank you.
Hi, Natalie from MLC. We were talking about the capability of supplier management and contract management. So which kind of capability framework, not framework, but what kind of training did you put in place and which organization? Very directly. Did you resort to? Were you happy with them? And what sort of competency were you looking?
They were awful.
It was you. Okay.
Yeah, so we did partner with Flux for the SRM training. I think really the key objective is that there was a mixed level of experience in the team, and so the key objective is just to make sure that there was alignment and consistency in the way that we approach SRM within the organisation. So we had everyone from the senior SRMs right through to the juniors attend the training, just to make sure that we do have that consistent approach, and just took us through the took us through the whole contract management SRM lifecycle. Right through. We talked about risk management, we talked about performance management, how to go about that, what questions to ask. So it was quite technical in nature. I think that's where we really needed to focus, because a lot of the soft skills were there. It was really around how to have those performance management conversations, how to have those commercial conversations, and getting right into some of that detail. So yeah.
But you also, the competency assessment went with that as well. So
yeah, the SRM training was for the central SRM team. We've also recently just done capability assessment across the organisation, and that's been really important in giving us the data points to really focus on for next year where the training development program needs to go. So I'm not guessing where people need capability. We've actually gone through that formal capability assessment, and we'll be leveraging those data points to set the agenda for next year. Yep.
Thank you. This is Sumi Sabanigam from National Australia Bank. So training absolutely is really important, but in the spirit of 70-20-10, training is 10%. But how do you ensure that training is sustained, and any sort of tips on how do we measure that there's been sustained improvement in the way we, implement SRM practices in the organisation?
Yeah,
Alan, do you want to go first?
I can take that. Yeah. Yeah, it's a really good question. The way we run the training generally is kind of learn, apply, learn, apply, learn, apply. So it's not, here's 2 days of training, good luck. You actually have to kind of get people to apply it to their day jobs. So part of it is around the format and how you construct the training. But the second bit is making sure that, they're not working on fake case studies. They're embedding it into their day job, I think is a key part. And then the third part is we then, well, depending on how we set it up with the client, but normally we would try and take checkpoints as well to make sure that it's still embedded. And typically, if we can, we want it to result in the joint account plan, or certainly their half of the joint account plan. So then you can start using that to measure whether they're actually achieving what they should be achieving. So that's kind of how we approach it, but it also depends on the audience, because I think there's 5 audiences that we need to educate or train. There's the core central team. So that's one. There's the wider procurement team, but then you've got your business stakeholders that need training, and for some organisations, we've got a client now that wants 8,600 internal stakeholders trained, which we're still getting our head around, and they want it to be accredited as well, which is quite interesting. So internal stakeholders is group 3. Group 4 are your executives, and let's face it, they'll never attend a training course. So that needs to be education, right? So somehow you need to educate them, but not have them attend a training course. And there's some techniques that you can use on that. But the final group actually is you'll have some suppliers that require training as well. Some of what you're trying to do, suppliers may not be ready for, or perhaps they're not structured that way. Some of the global companies where they're sort of very siloed, and you're trying to do a strategic partnership globally with them, that gets very difficult. So the 5th audience is your suppliers. And we have one client, I'll mention it, Kimberly-Clark. They actually trained their suppliers and stakeholders in the same room. And that, one, it was challenging, but 2, it was incredibly successful. So those are the 5 audiences and how I'd approach it.
Thank you.
Anything else anyone want to add, or it's quite comprehensive? Yeah. Okay. Yep. Another question.
Thank you. Rebecca from MMG. I just want to reference back on what Joe from Zip presented earlier on. There's increasing challenge and expectation on procurement team to take up the role as the orchestrator. And I feel that we share the similar sort of high expectations in our organization. Reference back on what Nika mentioned earlier in your speech about how to design your organizational structure right at first place to fulfill those roles. So my question is related to what's your experiences and view on, the recommended structure for supply team to take up that orchestrator's role? Because, we have supply purchasing team located in Vientiane, Laos, and we have our supply procurement contract management team located in Melbourne, and then we have head office in China. So this is all over the place, making it very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, it's a global organisation, so we're not indifferent. So in Telstra, we've got presence in many countries as well. So what is interesting, we've actually, I think, Ellen, you said it earlier, you've seen all the models. Well, guess what? At Telstra, we've tried all the models as well. So our current model, though, which is really interesting. So we've still got a centralised team. So that obviously sets all the guardrails, does all of the frameworks and everything else. So the team used to reside in the GBS, so which is your shared services environment. So with one of the last reorgs, we've dissolved the GBS business. So that business does not exist anymore. So what this means is we do still have a scaled down function, so which is our procurement function, which does all of your traditional procurement stuff. So, but it's a scaled down version. And, you know, we moved all of the other functions directly into the business units. So that's why the teams like mine, for example, in enterprise business, you know, becomes that sort of bridge for our sales communities, you know, and all other employees of the enterprise business. So they will come to my group. So if we need to get a new supplier, you know, get them onboarded, things like that. So my team is trained in those sorts of things. So we will then make sure that we've got all of the right information. And we deal with a procurement team in turn. So it doesn't mean that others can't deal with a procurement team, absolutely can. So, but we now become that bridge. So in terms of the org design, so what we now found is, and again, Ellen, I'll reference, you said earlier, so the business now takes a lot more accountability in actually the relationship management. The business are the ones who know the better, you know, landscape, you know, they know the work, they know what the suppliers are doing, not doing, which suppliers. So that's why we've decided, you know, the proximity of that, you know, will reside with the business, but then you still have to follow the procurement process. When we talk about the training and everything else, so yes, it would be nice to have for all of our, you know, 7,000 employees of enterprise business, you know, to go through the training. But the reality is, you know, if my team is trained, then they can execute and support the rest of the business.
Thank you. Any other questions? Anyone awake on this side of the room? Oh, fantastic.
Mary Dill from Healthcare Victoria. I just wanted to ask you about scorecards. You did mention that before. What are some of the key KPIs or lead measures, especially, that you put on a scorecard which help you drive performance?
Yeah, yeah, good question, and it's not always easy. So we spend a lot of time in developing a scorecard, working out what data points we're actually going to sit behind each of those pillars. So I talked about there's safety, risk, customer service, community, commercial, continuous improvement. So it's not a one size fits all. You really do need to invest time in, okay, well, for this contract under the customer service pillar, what are the actual, you know, data points we're going to collect to actually measure the supplier within the scorecard. So yeah, unfortunately, yeah, it is tailored for each sort of scorecard. I'd like to say we're a little bit more sophisticated with data points directly feeding into the scorecard. I'd love to see that, but we're not there yet. It's manual, so you know some organisations do get to that point. But yeah, at the moment, it's really about when you're creating it, figuring out upfront what are those data points, and then including those in your output. So
I just want to build on that very quickly. One of the things that people do wrong is they try and have the same KPI for everything. And to me, the KPI should be reflected to the contract that you have with the supplier. The secret sauce is how do you normalize the KPI? So how do you know, if you're measuring quality, you want to be able to roll all your suppliers up so that you can see who's best at quality as an example, or you could use the same example in safety, for example. But and so to normalize those, the way we do it is turn it a percentage to target. But in order to do that, you then need to not only have the KPIs, but also the weights and the targets. So it gets very complex very quickly, but that's how we approach it. And that way you can make sure that it's aligned back to the contract. So you will get quickly to the point that you can't do it on Excel. So after about 5 suppliers, I'd say.
I think visually for our execs, what we do, it's what Alan's saying, is in terms of normalising it, we have a red, amber, green status for each of those pillars. So execs can quickly see, okay, we've got some safety issues here and dig deeper. So yeah, that red, amber, green sort of system works for us. And then there's an overall score that the supplier gets, and that's consolidated. So for the first time, over the last 6 months, our execs are actually getting a consolidated supplier scorecard, which has those red amber grammars against the metrics, the overall score, and any sort of key highlights or issues. And they've certainly appreciated that visibility that I haven't had in the past. So.
There's a question.
Yes, my name is Mark. I work for V-Line. I have a question regarding value, how we creating value with our suppliers, with our current suppliers. We know here in Australia, sometimes we don't have that much, a massive range of suppliers for any specific service that we require. Different, for example, if you go to US or where I come from Brazil, that we go for a RFT, then you have like 100 different suppliers. My question is how we can get a value for suppliers, which is sometimes it's only one supplier in the country, and they are a little bit, they don't change in that much. How we can maintain the relationship with them and get a value with them. Do you guys have any tips on that?
Very tricky. Well, to be honest, it is tricky because if you've got only a niche supplier, and there is only one in the country that provides those services, they certainly can walk around with a chip on their shoulder and it's our way or the highway. However, it all comes back down to the communication and then open dialogue, because clearly there is something in it for them in that relationship. So, and getting to the bottom of what that actually is. Because if they're in that business, so if they're going to lose their big customer, it's obviously a big deal to them as well. So the quicker you can get to the point of what's in it for them, and what they want in return, so, and vice versa, so the better their outcome will be. But yeah, you certainly won't be able to do, maybe on that scale, maybe you could consider the options, maybe instead of the one supplier, you can go to 2, 3 different ones, to provide the same service. Not sure, but it does make it easier, obviously, if you can have a challenger, in a situation, because you obviously do your own thing, you play each other off again. But in those circumstances, if you don't, there might be other providers that you might be willing to split up the work, in the way that you actually do it, instead of one engagement. I think you're the best advice. And we certainly have been in the situation, right now. So we've got a particular supplier, which is services, our emergency services, and it's quite a niche technology that they're providing. So unfortunately, there is an alternative. That alternative, really well. So we've got no choice. But to go with this, and we're now in the conversation. Okay, so what is it that you want? And this is what we need, in return. So
I'm reinforcing what Nika's saying. I started my career at Fisher. I ran that procurement. We were, and one of the jobs I had to do was a deal with the client. We were the 4 morning teas production runs for the Japanese steel manufacturing. That was our annual volume. They could do in 2 hours, basically, production runs. So they didn't care, really, but they had an amazing, definitely had an amazing relationship with them. Partly because they recognised at that time the Japanese valued longevity of relationship, and they valued market share, and they valued collaboration. So those are the levers that we were able to use. We couldn't use volume, we couldn't use price. We had to, and we had to sell to them why we were a valued customer. There's a great book, it's quite an old book, by Professor Michael Leenders called Reverse Marketing, and it talks about how you need to sell back into your suppliers. If you can find one, I've got one copy which I found, this book's probably 30 years old, it's an amazing book. But that whole concept of reverse marketing back to your suppliers, it's sort of the forerunner of customer of choice, I think. So, yeah.
Well, spot on, it's that value, what do they value in your relationship, for example, and what you do. So, and that's the bit that you play on.
And then I think just one final question. So one final question. Okay. 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 Cool. Look.
There was one there.
Oh,
was
is
one
there
there?
one?
Yep.
So one final.
Thank you. My name's Megan King. I'm from Greater Western Water. I guess it's not really a question, but I'm just kind of curious to know what your experience is with strategically sourcing long-term solutions for, you know, say cybersecurity platforms with the rapidly changing technological landscape. Is there any kind of tips or tricks or pointers that you can lead us to?
What are you looking at me?
Leave that one for you, mate.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, good, really good question. And it sort of comes back to that Fonterra example I gave you. The big thing, and I think we do this as an industry, we spend so much time defining the requirements, and the requirements are going to move really quickly, especially in that space. And for me, it's about choosing the right partner that's going to go on that journey, because they're going to have to change. We're going to have to change. So, and I talked about the fact that procurement, we're not measuring the reputation and relationship. And I think that's the pivot that we need to do is when you're sourcing those people, actually put more emphasis on the fact that they'll be a partner of yours, that they can adapt to change, all those kind of other things, rather than can they supply the widget that you've defined, because that widget will change. And I suppose at a very high level, that's how I would approach it. So hopefully that answers your question.
Excellent. If you can join me in thanking discussion panel members from the Thank you. And then finally, Alan, if you can provide us with the closing remarks.
Yeah, have you got the doofer? Just a huge, again, thank you for everyone who's attended today and also doing the survey. Amazing turnout. I think this has been our most populated attendance since we've been doing this. And again, a huge thank you to Telstra. I was trying to work it out. I think it's 7 years that we've done this together. So amazing. Thank you again, Neil and Nika, for that. And the rest of the Telstra crew. And I know behind the scenes is always an amazing crew there. So, you know, we've talked a lot on training. I will, you know, I will do an unshaven plug for some of our training on SRM. And in fact, we've just partnered with SIPS. So our SRM training will become the global standard for SIPS. So we're really excited about that. I am catching up with a new chairman in a couple of weeks, new CEO, sorry, in a couple of weeks, to hopefully grow that even more so. But there is a public course. We run in-house courses and public courses. There's a public course coming up in November if anyone's interested. I mentioned the benchmarks. If you've done the survey and you want your benchmark, please do it. If you haven't done the survey, you can still do it, and please, they're free. You get the benchmark, and it will just give you some tips on which of the 6 pillars you need to put your time and effort into. It's a really good self-assessment of where you are. And then I just wanted to kind of give you some passing thoughts. I gave you the kind of 8 call to actions from the research, but you know, we've talked about getting to the sort of executive level or the C-suite. We know that there's a direct correlation between being good at SRM and getting executive sponsorship. So take your business case to your CEO or close to it. We've talked about that gap between technology and requirements. Come and have a chat. I'd love to show you what we've been doing on SRM technology. I'm sure Joe would love to show you what Zip are doing around intake procurement as well. So reach out on that. And then, of course, just outside the door is what you've all been waiting for, which is this year's report. Please read it. We'd love to get your thoughts, comments, feedback, because you know, now that we've written this one, we now have to think about what we're going to write for next year as well. And I can see the team wilting, as I mentioned that, after a year of hard work. So just a huge thank you from me, but please, talk to us. We'd love to hear your thoughts, comments, and, if we can help, we'd love to as well. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so that brings us to a very sad time for this year's summit. Again, thank you everyone for